Right. Welcome to Bloom, a place where we inspire you to dare and create meaningful change in the world. And I have a guest today, Ishita Agarwal, who I met at a workshop, a Meta Helm workshop, a dear friend of mine. And we immediately clicked because it was very obvious that we were both neurosensitives and had lots of stuff to talk about. And I really wanted her to be on the show because she does, professionally and privately, she does so many things that I think are immensely inspiring and useful to this community. So welcome, Ishita.
Thank you so much, Yole. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Let's see where it takes us. I think the first thing that I noticed about you, Ishita, was this trait of going beyond of what the tradition is, of what is expected maybe in your society, and this curiosity. And I really liked when I asked you for a motto that what you sent me was curiosity, faith, and resilience. And I think that fits you really, really well. And I'd love to expand on that a little bit because it is something that does not always come easily to neurosensitives, because that victim in us or that introvert in us can be at odds with our desire to expand and change and bring change to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So the words curiosity, faith, and resilience came to me at a time where I really needed to evoke those things in myself. And it was actually on another podcast by this mindfulness teacher that I follow called Corey Mascara. And he really like built on this entire phrase and how we can apply it in our lives. And I've actually like been on lots of nature walks, just thinking about this phrase, expanding on how these traits have really helped me evolve my thought process and my actions. So for me, like resilience has been a big part of growing up, of evolving, especially as a woman of color living in a relatively traditional society in India. Um, Being resilient has been one of the most important traits to keep going forward. And resilience is best supported when you're curious about your environment, when you keep questioning things, not to the point that you go crazy, but like just understanding perhaps some roots, going into a little bit of depth about things, and then having faith that, whatever is needed in my life will work out and whatever isn't will kind of fall out. And that's what really made me more resilient to keep moving forward. So yeah, while I do, live in a very traditional society, I feel like it's almost one of my passions to help that society grow and to be a good example so that women around me can also follow their hearts without feeling pressurized or like they're going against what they've been raised as.
That is such an important point, for men for sure as well, but definitely for women in most societies. And I remember my path that I made many mistakes at the beginning of my life because I wanted to step out of conformity. And I did in many ways, but there were always points where I didn't, against my own gut feeling or against my own personality. And that always then needs a lot of work to disentangle whatever decisions you made. So, I applaud you to the fact that you do that so early in your life, and that you want to be a lighthouse for other women in your society to follow. So this is exactly what this podcast is about: people that say, I'm going to step out there and lead.
Yeah.
So let's dive in a little bit, because you do at least 3 different things that I know about, and one also has to do with resiliency. So we'll return to that. So you run a business that's called CreatiVibesMedia, and I already like the way you write it, and people will find it in the notes because it's already very creative. And it's about strategy, digital marketing, and product consulting. And you do it for organizations that have a purpose. And I really love that phrasing. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that and the podcast that you just started as well. And then we'll get into the yoga and healing modalities and that you're already teaching and expanding. So over to you.
Awesome. So Creative Vibes Media is kind of my baby of like 2 years now. It started actually as a small comic art page that I started on Instagram because I loved to doodle. And from there, I thought that, since I'm already working freelance, what if I create and change things around a little bit and make it into a media company? So now I actually run that with my partner, Alejandro, and we are essentially working with organizations that have a purpose, who are trying to make a positive difference in their consumers' lives. And my approach is very visual. So I'm a visual communicator and a visual learner. So I use a lot of visual innovation boards. We use design thinking exercises, some amount of agile and scrum principles to manage products and projects. And then we essentially tailor the services according to the needs of the customer. So it's all very personalized because I believe in that everyone has a very unique requirement, and especially as sensitives, we can really, understand what that might be. So to that end, I just try to make it as streamlined as I can. So with the podcast, it's a fairly new podcast called Product Panda on the Run. And I'm building that podcast with another really cool product manager called Glauber in Barcelona. And we're building the entire podcast as a product. So we're doing a full discovery. We're understanding who our users are, what they might need, what their core values are. And we're essentially creating a value proposition for the exact end user that we're trying to enrich through the podcast. And yeah, we're going to have some guests coming on to it soon. So we'll have more expansive conversations around product and different facets, which people don't consider, and how it can be used across industries. And the third thing is that I'm a mindfulness practitioner. So I practice yoga, meditation, pranayam, which is breathing techniques, and chanting very regularly to kind of keep my energy centered, be show up as the most in my body person that I can, because sometimes our energy can be very outward. So just bringing that back in. And I'm also learning a few healing modalities right now, like Reiki, which I hope to share with the world soon, and yeah, help other people expand.
Yeah, I love that mix. I absolutely adore that mix, because to me, that is so typical for many people with our trait, and that is that we have more than one hat if we choose to. And that is one of the challenges that many of us face initially, and that is we live in a society that says choose one hat. Yeah. And before it was, you need to keep that hat on for 30 years. Thank God that has changed for your generation. But to know and understand that we are maybe even more complex, not just complex thinkers, but also more complex beings inside due to our creativity and curiosity, and maybe you could say adaptability in the sense that whenever we find something that inspires our curiosity, we try and adapt to it by understanding more of it, not by restricting ourselves. So many, highly sensitives that I know actually have the problem of not expanding too much, meaning not losing focus, because there are just so many things in this universe that one could do. But I think you are a wonderful example of somebody who decided or found out what are the major ones that my heart, really resonates with, and then to actually go and build something around it that for many people would not obviously belong in the same business. But to you and I, it's completely obvious that it does. And to have the guts, to go out there and just put it together and not listen to to what is expected of you or what other people do. That is so important.
Super agree. Yeah, that was so beautifully put, Yole. Like, I think you summarized exactly what we do so wonderfully. So recently I also learned about a new term called multi-passionate souls.
Yes.
Yeah. So, we have so many interests, so many passions, and so many talents, right? And it's difficult to streamline and find time for everything. Like, I have 10 other things on a list that I want to do, but like finding the right time, space, even people, to connect with who can help you build on that. I think that takes a lot of guts, to really expand your life so much that you can follow everything that you really want to do. And interestingly, like how we spoke about wearing many hats, I'm also part of this community called Generalist World, where essentially it's other people who are generalists in their field or across fields, really. And it's like a really wonderful community just to connect with people, learn about things going on, and like have conversations with people from across the globe. And that really helped me open up and see my own skills in a very different light. So instead of feeling like I need to specialize and, go into a tunnel, I've now started to kind of expand, like more like a tree, like, with branches going out. And that shift has really helped me, just be more accepting of myself. And with respect to the different hats that we wear, I think it's also important to have role models for each of those hats, because we all feel like there has to be one role model. As a kid, you're made to do these exercises like, who's your role model? And you're like, my mom, my dad, or someone in, close to me, or like Mahatma Gandhi or something.
Yeah.
But I think as I grew up, I think it's important to have different role models for different aspects, even of your personality. So, like for me, Yole, I think you're one of my role models in terms of how to, figure out my sensitive side, work with this soft energy rather than trying to fit into a more competitive, way of living. And similarly for, like how to maybe speak with my family, I have a different role model. How to work for my art page is a different role model, for my content services, digital marketing, it's a different role model. And I think all of them kind of add up and, create this very beautiful resource.
Yes, and to understand that that is a resource and not a problem, I think is one of the really important steps for neurosensitive change leaders. Because many, a lot in this industry, many people say, specialize and more linearity. And I have a bit of an issue with the word streamlined, because to me that is sort of, I'm sure you mean, we can, talk about this, you mean something a little bit different from it, but for me it always means sort of taking what you have and making it less, rather than understanding that if you're, and I love this word, if you're a multi-passionate soul, that there's a reason for that. And that
Yeah.
you're meant to actually take the important facets of that and build something new. You know, that's what innovation is. And if you leave out, let's say, if you would leave out your voice of intuition, you know, and we might talk about that as well again, and that understanding or openness for a certain kind of uncertainty that you have, and your cultural background of working with the body in, you know, we've copied a lot of that in Western society, but, you know, you're right in the middle of it. And to sort of say that is not just a hat I put on, that is an intrinsic part of who I am, how I function, how I recalibrate, how I recharge. And I will put whatever the essence, the soul essence of that is, in every one of my projects. That's what it is about, I think.
That's so beautifully put. I think you worded it better than I could. Truly, because I sometimes when you're in the thick of things, you forget that in this moment, I'm not just bringing who I am right now. I'm bringing all the growth that I've done, especially since I decided to grow, since I took on that resilience, curiosity, faith kind of mindset. And the law of compounding effect is something that I've started to really, really believe in, because no effort goes unnoticed or, unheard. I think just keeping on moving forward is the only way to maybe achieve all the things, the little intuitive voices that keep coming up, right? So I think streamline is a very interesting word. Like I'm glad you brought that up. For me, what I've understood of the word, or at least my perspective on it, is that when you have multiple passions, right, it means that like our minds are also very distracted because there are 10 things that I have to do in a day. So for me, streamlining basically means to have structures for each of that passion, each of those projects, so that you can just like open up a file or open up a document or Notion or whatever and have everything there. So that's kind of like different streams of different lines of thinking is how I look at it, instead of perhaps the way that mainstream culture makes it like, oh, you have to like compress and become, fit into this box. Um, yeah, I thought I'd just mention that a little bit.
It's very, very unfortunate that we don't have the option to pull out one of your Miro boards now, because I saw a structure in front of myself immediately, because people on the podcast can't see it, but maybe those who look at the video, is you made a hand movement where you identified separate lines, maybe a little bit like a phone where you have different, parts that
Columns.
Yeah, columns, thank you. But what I actually saw, and what I think what you're actually doing or growing to, is building a structure that allows you to how can I say that, to build something that is interconnected, that does not have to be separate boxes or separate lines. But maybe that's why I call it soul imprint, because
Beautiful.
Let's say your visual creativity is one of the pillars, right? And it's in every single one, because you cannot see the world much differently if that is your main way of looking at things. And I see it more like a net, a fabric. You said that you started, it's not knitting, you used another word.
Cross-stitching.
Yeah, cross-stitching. It's like creating a wonderful fabric out of those various streams. And it's only when you need to adjust something, anyways, that's the way I would put it, that you pull it out and say, I'm going to make a separate category of this, to just check and see where does it belong now. Where am I going to put that in terms of organization of of the fabric I'm actually building?
That's such a beautiful visual analogy, I think. So, even in sacred geometry, right, it's all about the interconnectedness of
Yes.
everything. So, even seemingly separate events are all just part of the same cosmic fabric.
Yes.
Um, and another way to perhaps visualize it could be as a mandala. So mandalas are basically like concentric circles, and you create patterns within each concentric circle, within the circle, within the circle, until you reach the locus. And I think if we imagine it on a more 3D or 4D kind of space, we can see how every design, every feature is really so essential to the entire, the whole of the mandala. And I think similarly in our lives, every little thing that we do is, like you said, our soul imprint. It's so important to be there, like to express that authentic side of ourselves, And so even there was a word that I learned in university about how we have overlapping identities. So we all play multiple roles in our lives, right? So it could be that I'm right now running a business, I'm an artist, I'm a meditation practitioner, I'm also a daughter, a sister, right? So there's so many roles that we're playing, and that intersectionality, right, where all of those roles intersect, that little intersection is who I truly am as a whole.
Yes.
However, in micro moments, I'm probably just playing one or two of those roles. So,
Yes.
right, like looking at our lives in that larger lens, um, that can really help us maybe expand our perspectives.
Let me expand. Yeah, I love that. I love the way you put that. Expand our perspective, but it also does something else, which I know is really important to you, and you foster that for yourself, and you want to foster it for your clients, and that is how to return to your center, how to keep that absolute soul essence intact, so
Yeah.
that if you change roles, you don't completely flip out. I mean, many times, for example, if you go into the role of a daughter, maybe in your society, you need to leave the change maker in front of the door, or you had to, that
Mm-hmm.
innovative side of yourself. Because in India, the role model for a woman is completely different from a daughter as well. I mean, you're not meant to go and say, I'm a rebel. So,
It's very subtle, the
yes, you
rebellious
do.
side. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know more about it than I do, but even I know this. So, um, tell us a little bit more about how you, for yourself, and how you plan to do it for your clients, to allow for that center to be there most of the time.
Wow. Yeah, that's such an important one. So interestingly, like even when I work with my clients, we always start with a short breathing exercise. So what I've noticed is that whenever we start a new meeting or any new activity, our energy is like all over the place. We're excited. There are like 10,000 thoughts in our head, and so many ideas. So I love to always start with a check-in, a small breathing exercise, and then, let the whatever is supposed to happen kind of flow. And more personally, like for my own, you know, mental peace and wellness, I love to practice yoga and different forms of yoga for different energies. So when I'm more, active and more fast-paced, I do Ashtanga yoga. When I'm a little bit more relaxed, it would be Yin yoga. And then I also love to do pranayam, which is actually breathing exercises.
Mm-hmm.
So those have been essential for me to just kind of streamline my thoughts, and even sometimes lose them. So, which is, very rare, I think, in the fast-paced world that we're living in. So there are different breathing techniques that I really love to do, and those really help me kind of disconnect from everything and just connect to my core. I also love to read like tarot cards, and expand my mystical side, through something a little bit more abstract. I also love to read for friends and family, so that's been, that helps me kind of open up my intuition more. And yeah, I think that's the kind of stuff that I bring into most of the conversations and most of the people that I meet, the new people that I meet. I just try to lead from that place, which is, made it more mindful and more slow to connect with people.
Ah, I like that. Let's just spend a brief moment with that sentence, because that is so different from what is usually in the coaching or consulting business. It's get the most content done in the shortest amount of time. And you just said something completely different, and that is to slow things down. And that is also my experience, that it actually does a lot of much deeper work once you have the guts to actually even propose it and not feel. I remember I used to feel really stressed inside because I was so worried that my client would say, yeah, but we didn't cover 10 points, 10 of the points on the list while we were talking today. And I always found when we did that, we actually missed a lot of the deeper process that is actually necessary in order to change. So repeat that again for our listeners. Do it in your words, because I really, really love that.
Yeah, so the slower and the more mindfully that we work together, I think the more far-reaching the results are. So, for instance, one of my like hands down favorite clients, if I may say so, we worked for like nearly 2 years together. And through those 2 years, apart from just building content, building features and like understanding his product, we also built a very important connection with each other. So when I was writing or when I was building strategy for this specific client, I could almost use that connection that we had to think about things that mattered to him and thus to his end user. So all the blogs that I wrote, all the content I created, and the features that I kind of helped him implement, they all came from a very personalized touch. And you could feel his personality kind of jumping out, from his pages, from the websites, everything. And I think that is the most important thing. So instead of, like you said, mass creating content and having like these really intense, what are they called? Sheets with content going out every 2 hours. I think it's important to go deeper into what you're trying to communicate and then communicate that well. Like really care about what you're trying to say, slow it down, listen to yourself, and try to listen to who you're talking to. What do they want to hear? Bridge that gap, visualize it because I love visualizing things, and then put it out there, and we saw the metrics change, over the course of time. Initially, you were just getting a few readers, and then all of a sudden, there were hundreds, sometimes even thousands of readers for, the same kind of campaigns. So I think the intention and the amount of love even that you put into the work,
Definitely.
changes things.
And it's not just the love for the work, it's the love for who you are.
Yeah.
meaning the way you and I are structured, and 20% of the population as a whole, is that we are built to listen. We have these incredible antennas and and this radar screen, but that can only really serve our clients best if we're not hassled. And if our
Yeah.
client is not hassled, because otherwise we get so much interference in the signal. And I really like how you said that, to do product consulting and marketing that I think would be worthwhile. If you don't have the ability to listen to your client at a very deep level, who is that person really? And what are his goals outside from the yada, yada, yada that we give to people that we meet? I am and I do blah, blah, blah. So that ability to deeply connect and sense the subtle and then build a bridge, that's who we are. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, well, you said it. I only summarized it. But remember, I have this in my podcast, the last episode was, that we are bridge builders in a fractured world.
Ooh,
and what you mentioned is exactly how we build bridges. It's one essential part. So to have the guts, and I really love, that you brought this into the conversation, to have the guts to do that in your business work, to not, as we say, use role models that are different from how we, in German you would say, we tick, the way we are, the way we are in the world. So I had a question here, and that is maybe what we talked about just now. Is that the quality that you want to embody in being a role model? Because that's how we started the conversation, that you say you want to be a role model for other women around you.
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I would say yes, absolutely. I think we have this, the feminine energy in women, which is unfortunately not let out as easily in my society. I feel like the more women lead from that feminine, the gentle, the caring, and like the listening energy, like you said, the better the things that we do become. So while I'm still figuring things out, while I'm still, making mistakes and learning, I do really hope to embody like the more intuitive, more gentle aspects of myself and continue leading from that space as I follow my intuition. And I think it was recently when I was speaking with someone else that I realized that the biggest change that we're trying to make is really just within ourselves, and that those changes, they add up and they can inspire others. So I would say like I'm my biggest pet project, like trying to grow, evolve, and even experience different aspects of myself. And I hope that just me doing that encourages other people to do the same, because I think stagnation is the worst thing that we can do to ourselves, like just accepting things as they are. So really like, being more curious, being more imaginative, creative, trying new things, failing at new things, especially. I think that's where I want to lead from.
I love that. And I can't wait to watch you.
Oh, thank you.
Just one add on maybe is that, because that is very often misunderstood, about the feminine, about that sort of other approach, is that it can be very fierce. That just because we are soft we can also be fierce in that, and it's what we need. We need that as women, because if we go too much to that side that has always been expected to us, get hit and smile, just make a nice face and be kind.
Yeah.
That is not what we're talking about here, just to be clear.
Absolutely.
What you're saying is a less hierarchical, less aggressive, less I'm the boss here approach.
Exactly. Without having to say that you're the boss, it's like, yeah. And, to that end, there's a goddess in Indian culture called Durga, and she really embodies that fierce feminine energy. And she's like gone and destroyed multiple monsters, she's like really badass. And yeah, I have so much respect for her. And really, like, I think from that, angle, even the kind of gods and goddesses present in my society are really good role models for the kind of energy that, I've been wanting to embody. So I would highly recommend people to look up Durga, and learn about this other edgy feminine side. Um, yeah, because the feminine has
I
a
definitely
lot.
will. I know a little bit about her, but I definitely will now that you inspire me to do that, because without that, and you used a wonderful word, badass energy, we don't get anywhere.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah, absolutely. So as much as I love this conversation, we need to wrap it up a little bit. And my last question is always, what did I not ask that you would love to add, or that we've forgotten to talk about? And without wanting to put you on the spot, if there is anything that you feel I did not, hasn't come up yet, that you would like to add to the conversation.
I feel like we covered almost everything. However, something that I would like to add is another aspect of myself I've been working on is changing my perspective to nature first, which means that when I go outside, or even when I'm inside like a space, I first notice the plants or the sky or whatever aspect of nature that's available. And then I kind of put everything else around that. And in fact, there's a book that I'm working on right now, which looks at how to change our perspective, to more nature first experiences in our cities. So perhaps that's something, that, yeah, even I'm still working on, but could be interesting for people to, notice.
It's a wonderful, wonderful aspect. Thank you for that. This understanding that we are part of a whole system, that it's not humans and everything else, but to return to an understanding that, again, we are part of a fabric, and that we need to appreciate and understand that and respect it and love it and enjoy it. Which reminds me, we didn't cover one thing, and that is that what you do with your business, and then let's just for a moment just spend a moment on that what for you organizations with a purpose are for example organizations that bring change in health and well-being, or in sustainability, which ties in that aspect you just brought up, and that you just don't just support big organizations, but you also support individuals that are on their path. So I think that I really wanted to mention that, for people who possibly want to connect with you, because it's just another very important facet of who you are and how you lead and how you present yourself in the world and where you want to bring change.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for mentioning that. And I think, it's important to just maybe put everyone under the limelight. It doesn't matter how big or small or, wide your reach might be. I think when any human being is given the right environment and the right set of resources, like they can thrive to a next level. So I also see myself sometimes as an ecosystem builder. because essentially it's not just that we're working in vacuum, right? Our environment affects us just as much as we affect it.
Hmm.
So creating those like healing, innovative, creative kind of environments is something that I really love doing.
Hmm. And I will cheerlead for you and keep my fingers crossed on your path. And I'm looking forward
Thank
to
you.
following what you're going to build. And I thank you very, very much for having been part of this podcast and, also inspiring me to reconsider some things on my path. So thanks very much, Ishita.
Thank you so much for having me, Ole. And I hope that the podcast blooms.
So do I.